Hello everyone. In this video we're going to be talking about Bitwig Studio version 1.1 beta build number 5. So this is the open beta that was released to all Bitwig Studio owners I think just yesterday. And so anybody who already has Bitwig Studio, you can download this, you can install it, and you can test out what is probably going to be a release coming very soon, like the actual official release. So when you do download it, let me give you a couple words of caution and advice that you can either take or not take. When you have the choice of either dragging or dropping it into applications, at least on a Mac, what I'd recommend you do is drag and drop it out to your desktop like so. That way, if you go into your applications and open up Bitwig, it's still version 1.015, and then on the desktop can be the beta build. I'm only going to use the beta probably this one time to make this video because I've already had some like pretty serious crashes and glitches using it, and I just feel more comfortable and confident using that official 1.015. I'm sure we'll be at 1.1 very soon, so I can wait for all of these things, but I understand if you can't wait and you need to start using these new features right now. Also remember, like I just said, this is a beta build. They did write on their website that if you're going to make any videos to at least state that it is a beta, so it's not 100% stable, not the official release as of yet. Also, for this video, I'm assuming you already know how Bitwig Studio basically works and functions. If you don't, there are plenty of great videos out there that do a good job of overviewing Bitwig Studio. My videos are a little bit more in depth and specific, so if you want the quick and dirty, here's how you navigate, I would encourage you to check out a different video other than my own. Also, what we're going to do is just go through these new features in order, come back to the document, check them off. I'll do a quick example, not necessarily a practical example, to show these new features, and then we'll wrap this up. So hopefully we can go through these relatively quickly. I know that there's probably a lot more small little fixes and improvements that have been made, and if you think that there's something super significant that I've left out, which I probably will do, feel free to leave that in the comments. You can also check the change log, and you can specifically read all of the fixes and changes and new devices and things that have been added if you want to go in that direction to kind of cross-check my work here. So let's just jump in here and begin, and we're going to start with deactivating tracks. All right, so I'm going to create an instrument track. I'll drop a polysynth on here, and then what I'm going to do, just for the sake of example, is load up a bunch of reverbs with really low mixes. So let me just check this out real quick. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to duplicate this out a bunch of times. Okay, like so. Now, if we look at the view and go to the DSP performance graph, we can see that we're using some CPU. This isn't a lot when the only thing we have is this one instrument, but in a mix of 20 or 30 different instruments, this starts to add up pretty quick. And what you might want to do is kind of take a break from that track, not have it using all that CPU so you can focus on something different and then maybe come back later. And in this new version of Bitwig Studio, we have the ability to do that, and we do that by deactivating the track. So if I have this performance graph up, I go to the track, I right-click it, I select Deactivate Track. You can see that we saved that CPU right away. A couple things to take note of, though. This isn't like the freeze and flatten in Ableton Live, and I'll explain why. But if I have like my note in here, I have the ability to right-click here and select Bounce. But if I bounce something that's deactivated, I just get silence. So if you want to work in more of that freeze and flatten type way from Ableton Live, what you could do is activate the track. Now we'll bounce the track, and actually let me add on a bit of extra space for that reverb tail. Click OK. Now I can deactivate this track. I have the audio clip. And then if I needed to, I could go back and make any additional adjustments. The other thing to be aware of is that they've added the activate and deactivate here in the inspector panel. And And they've also changed the pitch bend range. So instead of it just showing up by default, it's now unchecked. So if you want to change your pitch bend settings, you can just select that toolbar and it opens up like so. So just a nice little space saving tip as well. So that's activating and deactivating tracks. Very good. Let's move on to bundling effects within VSTs. So we know that with Bitwig Studio and some of their built-in instruments, one of the cool features is that we can actually take our effects and bundle them directly into the instrument so that when we go through and we save the preset, it also saves that bundled effect along with it. Well, Bitwig is unique because even with their VSTs, they do what's referred to as sandboxing them. So they actually, with all of the instruments and effects that you pull in, they're using a different form of processing from what the main audio engine is using. So if your VST crashes or something, it won't crash the whole program. But now what you can do in this new beta build is actually emulate this kind of behavior here where we can drag and drop an effect. And I'll show you how you can do that right now. So let me just go in here, pull up an instrument, and let's get rid of that. So it just takes a second to load here. There it is, lovely. By default, this is turned off, but the way to turn it on is to just click this little arrow right here, show hide plugin post effects chain. So same thing as what we see with the polysynth. Okay, our post effects chain there like so. I can go into this instrument, turn that on, and then boom, we have that additional location to drop in any kind of effect we might want. But it doesn't stop there because you can actually drop in third-party effects as well if you want. So if we just go in here and grab hold of something, let's use the tube amp. The tube amp is a good example. So I could drag and drop that inside of the instrument itself, and now we see this like so. Sorry, sometimes when you're changing things, the note just keeps holding down. So a few other things that have happened here with the effects or with some of the instruments that you'll see. Number one is that we have an option for show plugin programs, aka show plugin presets, and that's really cool. So I can open that up and then, I don't know, let's check bass warmer, and boom, just by clicking it, it changed the settings in there. We also have this option here for show plugin sidechain. This is only going to work if the plugin you're using has multiple outputs, and we'll be talking more about that a bit later. But you could go in here and you could actually set up a sidechain input for this effect if you wanted. And so I could select audio 2, pre-fader, and then, you know, you can take that in whatever direction you want. It's not something I'd really recommend you do because I want you to stay focused on things going on inside of the application, but just my opinion, feel free to check that out if you want. And last but not least, we have this show plugin multi-out chain selector. So with this plugin, you see we have all of these different routings. Okay, that's kind of what these are corresponding to here. And for this plugin, we're not going to worry about it too much, but we will talk about this with Contact. Just be aware that it does exist in that kind of a way. So if I wanted, I could then go and I could save all of that together as a preset. So it's bundled in this kind of a fashion. Why else would you maybe consider doing this? Let me show you real quick. So I'm just going to go in and delete these. We now have the ability to create what's referred to as an instrument chain. So an instrument chain is kind of an interesting thing. What we can do is we could actually add multiple instruments in a serial kind of configuration. So one, the other, the next, etc. But maybe we don't want to process everything together, which right now, if I dropped on the polysynth, and then I also dropped on this guy, we'd be hearing the output from both of these at the moment. So let's just go ahead and drop the octave on this down 1. I'm sorry. I'm like, why is there no signal coming through? So we could line these up like so. And what I'd probably want to do is then perhaps, you know, process these guys separately. All right, so I'd add a certain effect to Serum, a certain effect to the polysynth, and then at the end of that, I could add in, a compressor or whatever to affect both of those at the same time. I don't really know if I'm ever going to use the instrument chain and do something like this, but it is possible, and that's one of the ways that I could foresee you using bundling effects within instruments beyond just the obvious reason for saving presets. Okay, so we have that one out of the way. We have a new device, the de-esser, and I'm assuming with all of their updates, especially the big ones, so 1.1, 1.2, they're going to try to get a nice kind of mix and match of things that they've added. So in this case, they've been nice and given us a new device. However, there are some other things that I think are probably more important that aren't in here. But let's talk about this new de-esser. So if I have an audio track and I set the input from mono input, it should now be getting the input from my computer microphone, and I'm just going to record in something here. This is Bitwig Studio's new de-esser, so let's check it out and see if it's super cool. All right, God, I hate how it keeps doing that. All right, so that's what we recorded in. This is Bitwig Studio's new de-esser, so let's check it out and see if it's super cool. Okay, we have that like so. And de-essers are mainly used for this purpose. If you have a vocal and the S is really popping out more than everything else around it, you want to turn down that one particular element. You can use de-essers in other contexts, but it's very rare. And in a lot of ways, what you would do to achieve a similar effect to this is a bit different, but I'll show you that in a minute. So we see we have this de-esser here, and it works really simply. Now I'm using S's all over the place. So we can solo out and try to find where those S's are occurring. And we have this little high pass band that starts at 3K and goes up to about 8K. This is Bitwig Studio's new de-esser. So let's check it out and see. So I'm trying to make sure that only my S's are what's showing up here in this little gain reduction meter. Now, when I turn this off of solo, we'll hear that we're getting some basic de-essing. This is Bitwig Studio's new de-esser, so let's check it out. This is Bitwig Studio's new... This is Bitwig Studio's new Studio's new Studio's new Studios new Studios new Studios new Studios new Studios new. So you can really see how that works. And if I pull this back, I'm going to be in essence compressing more, a larger band, a larger frequency spectrum. And I'm not sure if there is a filter on the other side, because typically a de-esser is utilized with a bandpass filter. But as far as I know, this is basically saying from 4.6K up, we're going to start to evoke some compression here. And we can change the steepness of that curve as well. This is Bitwig Studios. So this is going to be incredibly destructive. This is Bitwig Studios new 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 Studios new. And then that's a little bit more subtle, probably more like what you would do. But let's not forget that we actually can evoke de-essing our own way and have a little bit more control over it. If I add in a dynamics device here, I can use this post effects section to drop in like an EQ2, and then I can pick out that range for my S's, which seemed like it was around 4K. Usually 5K is that region a lot. Something like that. This is Bitwig Studios new Studios new Studios new Studios new Studios new Studios new Studios. So in case you're not sure what's happening, this is really how a de-esser typically works. We have a compressor that's only reacting to a particular frequency range. And in this case, it's from 3.9K up to 7K. So that's a de-esser on your own, but now they have one that you can just drag and drop in. The fun thing about this technique is that it doesn't just have to be used for S's, it could be used for anything. So we could go to like the bass range of our synthesizer and really compress the living crap out of it, turn it up quite a bit, and let the rest of the instrument, the mids and the highs, have their own more fluid dynamic range. All right, so that is the de-esser in a nutshell for you. And we'll get rid of that track. I hate hearing my voice. So here we go. All right, up next we have a new device, the Note Mod. So we'll take a look at this guy here. Let me just deactivate this since I'm not working with it. And I'm going to create an instrument track. I'm going to add the polysynth onto it. Let's just take a listen to it. Okay, by default, that's fine. I'm just going to add one long little clip in here. And we can set this up to loop also. So just one note is fine. Okay, so what I'm going to add after here is the Note Mod. And with the Note Mod, how this works is you have to start by selecting a source. If you want to use the clip itself, just leave it on device note input. So that's adjusting what we have here. And what we can actually do is go into the note effects and add something like an arpeggiator here. And in theory, I got this to work before. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't seem like it wants to work. And let's see, it doesn't sound like it was going to work. Let's see. Okay, for whatever reason, this isn't working now, but I'll try to get it to work in a second. But hypothetically, if you put the note effect in here, based on what this description says, use this chain to apply note effects on the chosen note source, which is this note source here. But right now, that's not working. So I'll delete that, and instead we'll focus on what this actually can do for us. All right, so we see we have these additional expression controls like so. I'm just going to drop an effect into here, and we'll choose the chorus. So you can hear that the chorus is working on the polysynth sound, but that's not really what the point of the Note Mod is. The point is to actually add some modulation here. And we can do it in a number of ways. Some of the classic ways, obviously, we could take the timbre control, and if I had multiple notes going in here, which we'll do, okay, so if I select timbre and put it on a mount, if I go into the clip itself, I open up the expression controls, select timbre, and now change these. In theory, we should get different amounts of that LFO on the chorus. But again, this is in theory because this is the beta version, so. So you can see how that works, and these all correspond with what you'd expect. So we could mess with velocity, we can apply key tracking as well. The key tracking one works a little bit differently because when you apply key tracking, it's working like forwards and backwards, so you have to be very subtle and careful about how that is applied. But feel free to mess around with that at your heart's content. Also panning, and the amp one, I'm not really sure how that works. It doesn't seem to have too much of a purpose if you're dropping it directly onto a track like we've done here. We also have the envelope, and that's actually where this becomes a lot more powerful. And what I can do is I can send this like a traditional envelope to something like, say, the mix. And if depth is at 100% up, it means that when I reach the end of my attack stage, that's the highest point that it's going to sit at. So we'll just really set this to the extreme. And now we'll set some release. So you can see how that's working there. So this is very powerful, not only for anything that you have on its own track, but you can also route this in pretty interesting ways. So let's go ahead and route this in a new kind of way. I'm actually going to mute the polysynth, or I'll delete it. We'll just create an instrument track. And on the instrument track, there's not going to be any sound, but we're just going to create this one note here like so, and then we'll duplicate that across. And now I'm going to add in an audio track, and let's just look for a pad of some kind. I don't really care what it is. Okay, that's at 128. Actually, let's make this interesting. Okay, cool. Now on this track, I'm going to add on our note mod. And this time I'm going to select the note source to come from instrument 4. Okay, so we can see that envelope is triggering. And if I bust the sustain all the way up, you can see that it holds longer with that yellow feedback light there. So I'll go in here again and I'll add in a chorus. It can be whatever you want. This is just for the sake of example. And now we'll just try to make this noticeable. So we'll have like a long attack, and I'm going to set this now to the mix knob so we actually hear something happening. For whatever reason, it's not re-triggering there. We'll go in here and change the length of the clip. So you can see how that works. There are some problems because when notes overlap or even when they're just kind of set up in this sort of a fashion here, legato, it doesn't always re-trigger. So that's kind of frustrating, but it is cool to know that if you have a part and you want to kind of modulate something with note inputs from that different track onto an audio track or onto a different instrument track, you can do it, and you can add in as many effects as you want here, and you could drop it in LFO, apply a bit of glide between those transitions. Whatever you want to do, it's up to you with the note mod there. What I would personally like to see is more of a basic general like ADSR envelope like what you have in Max for Live. I think that would be much more powerful because it's not dependent on anything else. The LFO in here is great. The step mod is great. I think all of the note effects, modulation effects are really cool, but I would love to just have a basic envelope that you could draw in and put somewhere. It doesn't seem like it'd be that difficult to do, so maybe that will be coming up pretty soon. All right, let's deactivate these guys since we're done with them and move on to our next topic. Okay, the next one's really easy to cover. We have the Multiband FX-3. All right, so I'll reactivate this now. Let's deactivate these guys. For some reason, the key command for that doesn't seem to work. It does work when you want to activate something. Let's see. Oop. Maybe I just don't know my key commands very well. I don't know. I'm not going to worry about it for now, but you do have key commands you can use also. Okay, so what we have here is our Multiband FX-3. It works just like the Multiband FX-2, which they've actually changed the look on these guys, which you can do as well. So it gives you that additional volume control here. So we can choose where we have those crossover points occur. So if this is at 80, everything 80 below is going to be affected in here. I'm not sure if there is a whole lot of 80 and below. We'll find out. There really isn't, so. Okay, so on the lows, maybe we want to add a bit of distortion. All right, now let's check out the mids. Okay, so we'll throw a couple frequency shifters on the mids and then on the highs. Let's just use a preset here to get something. Boost the highs. And we'll add a specific reverb to the highs. So this is kind of cool. Okay, cool. So you can hear how that's working. And then we can mix between the three of these. And I could go in here, and then for the low, for example, I could take it and I could put it into mono. And then for the mids, I could, I don't know, maybe I would increase it a little bit. And then on the highs, I'd really push the stereo imaging. And then in the scope of your arrangement, you could actually play around with those different knobs and parameters and adjusting things. And you can even modulate where these crossover frequencies are occurring. So that's very cool. You can see if we open that up, you can adjust that here in an automation lane. Okay, so pretty straightforward, just in addition to the FX2, Multiband FX2, the Multiband FX3. All right, I've already shown you guys the instrument chain. Probably not worth showing it again, but it's exactly what you think. It's just like what we have with our effects chain. Let's load in the polysynth. Let's load in a preset. Boogie Saw. All right. So what makes this unique and why this is so helpful is that I could now go in here and I could add like a note pitch shifter and go up an octave here. I'm not sure why that happened. Is there still one of those things going? I've got no idea. I'm at a loss for words, but cool nonetheless, I guess. And what I could then do is add in another polysynth here. In theory. Okay, so up next, we're going to look at the instrument chain. I misspoke earlier. I assumed you could actually just stack up instruments and they would go through one after the other, but that's actually not how it works. This is obviously just being set up here so that you have access to macros to control things in an instrument and then additional effects on top of it. So I guess what we could try to do, let's see if this works. I haven't tried this yet, but let's say we want 2 instrument chains. And in this one, I'm going to take the note effects and drop it down an octave. Haha, so I guess that's what you can do. Okay, so that's actually really cool. That's not how I thought that worked, but I guess this is how you really do want to utilize this. So you can drop multiple instruments on one instrument track and mix between them using the instrument chains as opposed to using the instrument layer, which we've already talked about the instrument layer in great depth, how you can go in here, drop your various instruments and mix between them. This might actually be a bit more intuitive for some of you guys to work it in this kind of a configuration. That's really, really cool. I've never heard or seen anything do that before. So that is the instrument chain. Up next, we have the crossfader. So the crossfader, and this is how you realize that Bitwig is encouraging DJs to work in the mix view here. The crossfader only pops up in this particular view. Okay, so if you're not familiar with how to get between these views, just hit the tab key like so. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete all of these for right now so I don't get confused. And let's pull in 2 pads or something. So I'll create in 2 audio tracks. All right, we have pad number 1. And we have pad number 2. And we could play both of them back like so. All right, that way you have an idea how they sound different. But we now have access to a crossfader, and that crossfader is down here. It's the A-B selection. So I'm going to go ahead and select that to view it. And you notice that it pops up down here like so. It works very easily. You can select side A, you can select side B, and now I can cross between the 2 like so, and I could even have 2 additional like effects tracks here. One with maybe a reverb that's all about the low end. We'll just increase this, and then a reverb that's all about the high end and is in a hall instead. I don't know, guys. I'm just screwing around at this point. And we could actually have these guys go as well following the crossfader. So let's go in here. I'm going to select these to pre, just to really heighten the effect. Turn these all up a bit. All right, so there's a lot you can do with the crossfader really for live performance. Obviously, if you had two full tracks, you can mix between them using the crossfader also. So that's helpful. You can learn the controller assignment there if you want to have your MIDI controller controlling that parameter. All right, so let's move on to the next thing. Yes, the tap tempo. I'm very happy that a tap tempo has been included, and I'm sure that in a future update, they'll probably have a specific place for it if they can fit it up here. As of right now, the way tap tempo works is you have to hold the control key on a Mac and probably on a PC as well, and then you can click the play button and we can tap the tempo in like so. So let's actually test this thing out, see how it works. I'm going to move back into the other view. Go in here, grab a full track that we'll be using in a second. Let's just turn this down at the start. And we'll see that Bitwig has analyzed this track and thinks its tempo is 143.38. But let's play this back and see what we get using the tap tempo. Turn it up a bit. Oop. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. God. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, you idiot. Okay, well, you can see that this actually doesn't work all that practically. Let's actually put it into the clip view here so that I can play it and then don't have to worry so much about hitting the stop button, although it will still happen, I think, but... Oh, yeah, it will. All right, let's try one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I'm obviously getting a reading that this is at 128 BPM. Obviously, be careful with your finger slipping. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with tap tempo working in this kind of a fashion. Hopefully, they add a little additional spot somewhere if they can find room for it. Okay, so that is the tap tempo feature. I'd go up here, change this to 128. Go in here, change my clip to 128 as well. And so now if I play back, even if I put this into a stretch mode, it should play back closer to its original tempo. Up next, we have the new stretch parameters, so I'll just show you these guys quickly. My biggest complaint with Bitwig Studio up until now is that the audio engine really does struggle if you have like 100 clips going in either, the clip launcher view or from our mix view here. You'll get these weird clicks and pops based on the stretching. You'll sometimes have complete audio cutouts, which to me is the one thing that I'm hesitant about with Bitwig Studio. When I'm asked, would you recommend Bitwig Studio? I always say, we have to wait and see what happens with the audio engine, because if you do buy this for the sake of performance, that's something you just can't have happen. And it was happening in version 1.04 when I did that live deep house set. It's continued to happen all the way up to 1.015. So maybe, and I can't say 100% if this is true or not until I test this out full blown, but perhaps these new stretch modes have fixed that problem, and maybe even they've spent some time working on the audio engine to fix that. So let's get into that. The first thing I need to do is actually stretch this track. So now that I know it's 128, I should be able to do this in under a minute. Okay, so that's like the one. It's here. I'm not going to worry about getting this perfect for right now. Okay. Okay, so we have that guy stretched and it's working on beats. So now, in theory, if we change our tempo, this should stay on grid. That's actually a really cool effect that you could try to use. I didn't think that would happen, but it does. All right, so let's talk about what's new here. I think they've just improved the algorithm in general, which wasn't flawless like it needed to be. And we also can adjust the grain size that's being used by the time stretching algorithm here. Okay, so we can either make it very small or very large, depending on what we want to do. And we can listen to those differences if I pull out a loop here and then really do some insane time stretching. Let's hear if this loop is going to work. Okay, so that should work for me. All right, and let's really do some intense stretching here. So we could change the size of the grains. So I'm hoping you guys can hear the difference there. At the top, the grains are much larger, and so when it is struggling to keep things on beat, you hear more clicks and pops. At the lower level, you don't hear so many of those clicks and pops, but you hear more artifacts of those individual grains. You can kind of hear that grainy grrr type sound. And then what we also have are our onset markers here, and these are things that seem to make a much greater difference. The first mode is just off, so they're not using onsets at all for playback in the algorithm. Second mode is, let's see, what does it say? Second mode is soft, so it's going to prioritize smoothness, and this does seem to work quite well. The other one is hard, so it's really trying to keep the power of those onsets. But you can hear how big of a difference that makes in the audio clip in terms of smoothness when we're moving through it. And the last one, this is kind of cool. This actually just lets you listen back to where the onsets are occurring in the audio clip. And that's actually just kind of a cool little like beat stutter effect that you can get using those algorithms. So really not that much to say about these other than check them out. My preference would probably be to use the smallest grain size and on soft. Uh-oh, now it's just playing back the onsets. Another little glitch in there. Actually, that was probably my fault. I probably wasn't on the right clip, but now it's all working. So check those out, see how they work. And when I do another like live set or I try to make a mix in here, I'll let you know if I have any more or less success with clicking and popping. Hopefully it's fixed things quite a bit. Okay, now we're going to transition into talking about the new routing features inside of Bitwig Studio. This is what a lot of people wanted. This is the main focus of the update. And I'll go through these relatively quickly. They're not too hard to explain. So what I'm going to do here is delete these two tracks. Let's create an audio track here. And I'm just going to record my voice in quickly on audio 1. This is the recording of my voice. Here it is. Yeah. Okay, perfect. So let's just go in and loop that up. This is the recording of my voice. Here it is. All right, and I will turn up the gain. This is the recording of my voice. Here it is. Yeah. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is which? The audio receiver. All right, the audio receiver is under routers, and what I can do with the audio receiver is just select the input source. So if I want to get my audio from audio 1, I can select it in here like so. Where this becomes more interesting, this is the recording of my voice. Here it is. Yeah. Is when we kind of use this in a parallel processing type configuration. So I'm going to select this to pre so that I'm getting this data in the clip itself. And so I can turn this one down. This is the recording. So now on audio 2, what I could potentially do is add in some effects. This is the recording of my voice. Here it is. Yeah. This is the recording of my voice. Here it is. Yeah. This is the recording of my voice. Here it is. Yeah. This is the recording of my voice. Here it is. Yeah. This is the recording of my voice. Here it is. Yeah. This is the recording of my voice. Here it is. Yeah. This is the recording of my voice. Here it is. Yeah. This is the recording of my voice. Here it is. Yeah. This is the recording of my voice. Here it is. Yeah. This is the recording of my voice. Here it is. Yeah. And then I can mute the original. This is the recording of my voice. Here it is. Yeah. This is the recording of my voice. Here it is. Yeah. This is the recording of my voice. Here it is. Yeah. But it doesn't just have to stop there if we don't want it to. I can go in here and I could search for that pad again. And I can actually add another... Oh, wait, whoops, sorry. Let me add this onto a new track. I can add in another audio receiver at the end of this. Okay, so it's not going through this same set of effects when I do this. I can add in another audio receiver, and I can select this input from audio 3, pre-fader again. This is the recording of my voice. Here it is. Yeah. This is the recording of my voice. Here it is. Yeah. This is the recording of my voice. Here it is. Yeah. And then I can add additional effects to process what's gone through here. But if I do add additional effects, it's also going to be processing my voice. So we're still working left to right. This hasn't like stopped everything, but it's just bringing in this bit of audio after all of these effects have already happened, if that makes any sense. So these effects are not impacting the pad sound, but any effects after will impact both the pad sound and my own voice. So if we add distortion, this will become very apparent to you. So there you go. That's how you use the audio receiver. That's how you use it in a very creative kind of way. But this can also be used very simply to like bus things onto one track. So if I had like a bunch of drum sounds and I wanted them all to be coming to this one track, instead of having to go in and adjust the inputs and outputs, I could go into that track, add a bunch of audio receivers, and then select those inputs accordingly. All right, so that is how the audio receiver works, but you can see it can be used in very creative and fun ways also. We also have the device note receiver. So let's take a look at that next. We'll just start from scratch again. And let's add an instrument track. And I'll just put in a couple of notes here. Whatever the case may be, it doesn't really matter, does it? Okay, like so. All right, so those are my notes. I'm going to add in another instrument track. And on this instrument track, I'll go ahead and drop the note receiver. And so for the source here, I'm going to choose instrument number 1. Okay, and now I'm going to add on a polysynth. And so we can now hear that the polysynth is getting its notes from instrument track number 1. There's a lot of applications for this if you get really creative and think about some of the things you want to do with that, because I could go into instrument 1 and I could add in at the start, an arpeggiator. And then I could go into the actual track itself. Actually, I don't think I can do this. Yeah, my apologies. You can't do this. Once you actually have something set up as a note receiver, there's no way that I can actually play any notes into the polysynth here. Even if I draw them in, it won't matter. Because it's using this as the source. So it's not using like my computer keyboard or your MIDI controller. It's literally using the note receiver and whatever you select here. All right, so that is the note receiver. Maybe not as fun as the audio receiver, but still a good routing option to be aware of. And the reason for this also, like before, as I'm going to show you, is if you don't want to have to go in and set up all of the inputs and outputs by hand, you can use those receiver devices to make life a little bit easier for yourself. And now we can talk about the MIDI routing and the VST multi-out routing stuff. To wrap things up, this is what people really wanted in version 1.1, and they got it. So let's talk about this now. We can set up a similar sort of configuration like we had before, where this is going to be my polysynth instrument here, and instrument 1 is actually going to be in charge of playing the notes. Well, why don't we just start with the polysynth by itself in this configuration. I'm going to add an arpeggiator at the front. And we know if I record this in, slow it down a bit. Okay, cool. So if I record this in, we can see that we're just getting those notes that I'm holding down. We're not actually seeing the arpeggiated pattern. And if I wanted, I could even go in and add swing to this. I'll do that in a second. But now what I can do is create a new instrument track, which can just double as a basic MIDI track. And I can set this guy up for its input to come from the polysynth here. Line this up to record, select record, click play. And voila, you see we're getting that arpeggiated pattern like so. What makes this so powerful is that we can also, well, first of all, we could delete this track here and replace this and then delete the arpeggiator if we don't want it and we want to fine tune what's come out of it. But what we can also do is something like turn on the shuffle parameter here. All right, and now let me just create a new instrument track. Again, this one is going to take it from the polysynth. That sounded dirty. I didn't mean for it to. And now I can apply some shuffle. Man, I always have trouble. Sometimes the global shuffle thing just doesn't work. But when it does work, and I got it to work before I started this video, what you can do is you can record that out, and then you'll actually be recording the shuffled pattern. But maybe I can still get this to work in my own way. I'm going to pull this up here. Okay, sorry about that. Another glitch. And now perhaps what I could do is go into the clip itself and apply the shuffle. Please work. Please work. All right, that's incredibly frustrating, but that is one of the powers of being able to re-record these things is when you get the shuffle working, and I tested this out before, so I know it does work, you'll actually see the MIDI notes falling off of the grid, and they'll shuffle accordingly. So that is very powerful, something to also consider there. There's really so many things we can do with these routings. If I don't want to just record from the instrument, I could also have a MIDI track in here like I showed you before. And then I could use the polysynth or any instrument for that matter. Set this guy up to take its input from instrument number 1 here. Okay. Maybe not. Let's try this a different way. What I can do is I can send the output of this to go to the polysynth. In theory, this should be working. Let's see. Instrument 1, here's my clip. I want it to go to the polysynth. So the polysynth, I want to take its input from instrument 1. So that seems to be working. So, oh my goodness, it will work. You just have to get these things set up. You have to try a few times, obviously, but we can take, a MIDI clip that we have, set it on a different instrument / MIDI track, and then send it to an actual instrument to play it back like so. All right, before I go any deeper and get myself even more confused and screw things up, let's talk about the multi-out on multi-timbral VST instruments. I don't really use Machine, so I can't speak for how Machine works to do this, but with Kontakt, this is very easy to now do using Bitwig Studio. So let's do it from the other view here just because it's a bit easier. I'm going to create my instrument track. I'm going to go in here and load up contact. I'll use contact 16 out. And immediately when I drop it on here, it's recognized that this is a multi-timbral, multi-output instrument. And so once this loads, we can see I can open it up and we have access to all of these different channels inside of contact. And I assume in machine it works very much the same way. So what I can do is go into contact and just configure something quickly. I don't ever really use contact for the instruments, but in this example I will be. So I'll have a string ensemble here. And let's also not load up a cello ensemble. Let's load up a concert grand. Why not? And so the first thing I can do is I can set this up so that these are outputting on different MIDI channels. In fact, that's already happening. But if I play right now, all we're going to be hearing are the strings, and they're outputting on channel 1. But what I can do is create a new instrument track, and this might take me a couple of times to get this right. I always get confused about this. And what I want to do is send the output to contact 5 and then select the second channel. And you can hear now what I've been able to do is isolate just the piano. And so I could draw in a part for piano like so. And then in instrument track number 3, I can set the output again to plugins, contact, and now use number 1. So that's very beneficial, and you can do that with as ever many contact libraries or whatever you call them that you load up inside of that particular instrument. But right now we have a bit of a problem. And that's that both of those sounds are being outputted to the same channel. But what I'd like to do is actually route these separately so we can have the piano coming through number 1 and the strings coming through number 2. And then the beauty of this, just like what we've had with the drum rack, is that we can process these guys separately. So I could drag and drop a particular reverb here. I can also pan them separately. And how am I going to do that? Well, in Contact, I have to set something up first. And let's just get rid of the browser here. Let's go to the Output tab. And I'm just going to turn all of these guys off first because it makes it easier for me to do this when I'm routing things. I just don't want to see anything else. So right now I'm just disconnecting all of the inputs and outputs. Okay, so this first one, I'm going to call this main. And now what I'm going to do is select add channel. 1 channel, 2, so it's going to be stereo. I'll click OK. I'm going to rename this to be, I don't know, other. And now with this, I'm going to set this up so that I can have it coming out onto number 3 and number 4. And you'll see that we've added 3 and 4 like so. All right, so now I have a second channel, a second set of outputs. And now I can go into my ensembles here and we'll leave strings going through main. We'll go down to concert grand and we're going to change this to other. All right, and now I could rename this to piano, rename this to strings. Maybe I'd change the order of these so I just knew. Rename these accordingly. And now I could go in here and I could process these with Bitwig effects. So I could add one type of reverb, or let's add a delay to the piano and a reverb to the strings. And again, because I have this coming from all ins, you're hearing both instruments at the same time, but you could go in and program different MIDI clips here. They don't always have to be playing together, in case you were wondering. Like so. All right, so that was the big feature that everybody wanted. You can see how easy it is to set that up inside of Bitwig Studio. Just make sure that when you're choosing the output here for these instrument tracks, you select the actual plugin itself, okay, and then choose the channel that's associated here inside of Contact, for example. I think that's pretty much it for new features. I apologize for stumbling and getting stuck a couple of places. I'm still not 100% comfortable with all of the new updates here, and I'm going to be waiting for the official release. But for those of you who can't wait, this is what's new. I'm pretty happy with all of the new features in here, but I can't wait to see what they continue to add on. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.